I want to remind our viewers that you can donate to Hurricane Melissa relief efforts using the government's official portal. You can also volunteer using that portal. The link is supportjamaica.gov.jm. Supportjamaica.gov.jm. And now, not only can you donate, but you can also register to volunteer using that very portal. And if you prefer a non-governmental organization, because not everybody's down with the government and has questions about how funds are being allocated, you can also check out Food for the Poor at foodforthepoorja.org. Food for the Poor has been doing stellar work in Jamaica for years in both housing and feeding people. So they do provide housing as well as distributing food and aid. So foodforthepoorja.org, or you can register with the government, donate to the government directly at supportjamaica.gov.jm. Jamaica needs all of your help right now, especially those of you abroad who are able to send whatever you can. Please do so. We need the help because trust me, it is an estimated 6 to 7 billion US dollars worth of damage. For comparison, Hurricane Beryl last year cost the country about 200 million. So that is 30 times worse than Hurricane Beryl. 30 times worse. Hurricane Beryl affected the economy for about 2 quarters, so about 6 months. We saw economic contraction. We saw, loss of productivity. We saw a spike in inflation. About 2 quarters, 6 months. Hurricane Melissa was 30 times worse than Hurricane Beryl. This is going to take us years to recover from. Now, we were trying to get the Prime Minister on the show tonight because we realized that it's been a week since the passage of Melissa, and he had not done any major interviews. And I had a whole lot of questions. It was looking hopeful for a while, but he did address Parliament today. And we understand he's very, very busy in a time like this. And given that he's addressed Parliament and has addressed and answered some of the questions that I had, we decided that, okay, we're going to bring you some of the highlights from that. And as we speak, that parliamentary meeting is still going on. So they're still going back and forth in the House as we speak. But here are some of the highlights from Prime Minister Andrew Holness's presentation today. One had to do with the hefty price tag.
Madam Speaker, detailed assessments are still underway, but I wish to share very preliminary, high-level estimates only to illustrate the scale of the devastation. Based on benchmarks from comparable regional disasters, physical damage to housing, commercial buildings, roads, electricity, water, and telecommunications infrastructure is estimated between 6 to 7 billion US dollars, equivalent to roughly 28 to 32% of last year's GDP, last fiscal year's GDP. It is, members, a major hit to our economy. And I want the country to appreciate that we have never had a disaster of this magnitude with this economic footprint in terms of the impact. Not Gilbert, not Ivan, all of those were relatively small to our GDP. To lose 30% of your GDP is significant.
So to put that in perspective, 30% of GDP is about 1/3. So 1 out of every $3 that Jamaica earns on a whole as a country has been wiped out. 1 out of every $3 has been wiped out. The Prime Minister said this was worse than Hurricane Gilbert in terms of percentage of GDP. These are staggering numbers. To further put this into perspective, 6 billion US dollars is about $1 trillion Jamaican dollars. That is about the amount that the government spends for the whole country in an entire year. That's about the amount of the national budget that the government spends to run the entire country during normal times for the entire year. And so if the damage caused is equal to the government's entire spending during normal times for the year, that means we need to double our income somehow. We need to make up twice what we usually make in order to pay for the repairs, for the damage, for the assistance, to rebuild housing, to fix all the roads, to clear the debris, and everything that we need to get done. But the challenge is that we have twice the expenses now, but our income is basically slashed by a third. And when you think about the industries and the areas that have been hit, agriculture has taken a huge hit. Tourism has taken a huge hit. Tourism is one of our two major sources of US dollars. And so with tourism taking a hit, what is going to happen to the dollar? Are we going to see a dollar slide? And with agriculture taking a hit, what is going to happen with inflation? We saw what happened last year after Beryl. Inflation spiked for 2 quarters. So we have inflation because of the hit to agriculture. We're going to have possibly a slide in the Jamaican dollar because of the hit to tourism. We also have the loss of productivity because of the increase in unemployment. And for those who are still employed, half the country now have no light. So many people can't work anyway, no light or internet or cellular service. And in today's modern age, most jobs require at least one of these 3 things: light, water, internet, data, cell phone service. So we are looking at a really, really bad situation right now. Let's go back to the Prime Minister. And by the way, he said the estimate conservatively is $6 to $7 billion. But we have heard some economists give estimates that are double that. So just yesterday morning, we were hearing, I don't remember who it was on one of the stations, putting the estimate between 10 and 14 billion US dollars, which is 50 to 75% of GDP. So 1 out of 2 of our dollars wiped out. And if we go on the high end at 75% of GDP, that's 3 out of 4 dollars produced by this country wiped out. So the Prime Minister also said that we need to expect slowdown in economic activity for the reasons I just mentioned. A lot of people are now going to be out of jobs, and those who do still have jobs don't have access to the infrastructure they need in order to complete those tasks. The PM said that the government will be handling the recovery in 4 phases.
Madam Speaker, as we move forward from the initial shock of Hurricane Melissa, the government's response is being guided by a clear, structured, and disciplined framework. We are pursuing recovery through 4 overlapping phases: immediate relief, emergency relief, stabilization, and recovery, and then long-term reconstruction and rebuilding. Each phase carries distinct priorities, but all share a single purpose: protecting the lives and dignity of our people and restoring our nation with greater resilience than before. The immediate relief phase began even before the hurricane had fully passed. In those critical hours, our priority was to safeguard life and maintain essential order. Search and rescue operations were initiated in affected communities as soon as it was safe to deploy teams. Emergency shelters continued to operate at scale, ensuring food, potable water, and medical services for displaced families. Our uniformed services secured critical infrastructure, while ODPEM, municipal disaster teams, and volunteers coordinated life-saving interventions. This phase focused on urgent humanitarian needs, clearing access routes for emergency response personnel, and stabilizing high-risk areas to prevent secondary loss of life. Then we entered the emergency relief phase, the phase in which we are now. This phase includes clearing and reopening primary road corridors, accelerating the restoration of power and water systems, and expanding mobile and community-level distribution of relief supplies. We have also mobilized medical outreach to shelters and affected districts while ensuring psychosocial support for children, elderly persons, and vulnerable families. International humanitarian assistance, including airlifted supplies and technical teams, began to arrive and integrate with Jamaica's national response system during this stage. The central aim of this phase is to relieve suffering, reestablish safe access to communities, and stabilize essential services across the island. The next phase will be the stabilization and recovery phase, which focuses on helping families and businesses regain a sense of normalcy and restoring the foundations of daily life.
As Prime Minister Andrew Holness speaking in Parliament this afternoon, describing the 4 phases of the recovery, getting targeted support to small businesses and farmers, reopening schools, and reestablishing transportation systems and routes. Now, massive amounts of aid are going to be needed. As we know, a lot of people have lost their homes. We have multiple families begging lodging with those whose premises survived the storm. You see 3-4 families cramped into a single family home, and people are opening their homes to neighbors, which is great. But we also know, and I've been hearing that in St. Elizabeth this week, the past few days, it's been raining a lot. And so one of the urgent needs is shelter. The Prime Minister said that they're going to be launching, or they have launched, the Building Support Program.
In terms of housing support, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, across the island, our first priority has been to deliver food, water, and medical support to every affected community. But we know that beyond these essentials, the greatest need is now shelter. Too many of our brothers and sisters have lost the very roofs over their heads. To address this urgent need, I am announcing a building support program for households in the most affected parishes as follows, and this will be an MP-driven program again. St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Manchester, Hanover, St. James, Trelawney. $10 million will be allocated to each constituency in those parishes.
Okay, so 10 million really does not sound like a lot, but I guess this is the start. So St. Elizabeth, Hanover, St. James, Westmoreland, Manchester, Trelawney get 10 million. Additionally, constituencies in St. Anne and Clarendon are going to get 5 million each, while other constituencies across the island will get 3 million each to assist with relief and rebuilding efforts. There were also some announcements about the role of the NHT in all of this. So NHT is going to be instituting a 6-month moratorium on mortgage payments for persons in the worst affected parishes, including Hanover, St. James, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Trelawney, Manchester, and St. Anne. They're also going to be extending a special home improvement loan of up to $3.5 million at an interest rate of just 2%, available to both existing mortgagors and contributors who need to repair and rebuild their homes. In addition, there's going to be a special grant of $500,000. Note what I said, grant, which is free money, $500,000 grant to contributors whose homes or the homes of their immediate family members were damaged by the hurricane. Immediate family means mother, father, brother, sister. That's immediate family. And that grant will be awarded based on the need. And that need would have to be verified and also the level of the damage sustained. So $500,000, it can go a long way in helping. Let's say maybe your roof got blown away, in helping to repair the roof and helping to make some of those repairs that are necessary. So that's a grant from the NHT for people who qualify, people who need it, in addition to additional loan financing operations, in addition to a freeze on mortgage payments for people in the worst affected parishes. Now, the PM has said that he's instructed JPS to try and put as much of the grid underground as possible. Interesting point.
With regard to electricity, restoration of power is proceeding in phases, prioritizing hospitals, water plants, communication backbones, and dense residential zones. The all clear for restoration of utility services enable JPS and independent contractors to enter the field at scale, while the ministry with responsibility for energy is coordinating grid stabilization and resolving localized issues such as low voltage and restored feeders. Yesterday, the JPS would have given an update on the status of electricity restoration. The government has given them strategic direction to make a priority to restore large commercial and urban centers in addition to critical public facilities. Moreover, they have been tasked in their grid restoration efforts to explore relocating, where feasible, the grid underground. We have given them directives regarding Montego Bay, the Elegant Corridor, and the Hip Strip would be two areas where focus should be given to put the grid underground. If other areas are feasible, going underground is expensive. So we have to balance between expense and getting the grid up. But if we are getting the grid up and we can get some resilience in it, then we have to get the resilience in. So we will balance as we can, but it wouldn't be possible for all the grid that we have to put back up to put it underground. But in areas where it makes strategic sense, then we are encouraging them and indeed directing them to ensure that that is done.
Interesting. I say that's interesting because you may recall the residents of Hope Pastures have been in a years-long battle with JPS, a legal battle with JPS, to get them to maintain the underground grid and to replace the elements that have been eroded. They've been going back and forth in court. The Supreme Court ruled against them and in favor of JPS. It went to the Court of Appeal. It went all the way to the Privy Council, I believe. And right now it's still in some appeals process where the residents have been really pushing for JPS to put this grid or maintain this grid underground. JPS has refused and they have fought tooth and nail. And now we have the Prime Minister saying, JPS, listen, we need you to put at least parts of the grid underground to build resilience into that. It's going to take a lot of money. Who is going to pay for it? That is the question.